us to focus on some of the most important issues facing our country, and what we're going to be discussing today certainly is one of those issues. And I also want to thank Congressman Khanna. I think, as most people know, Ro has been a leader on so many issues in the House. In my view, has done an extraordinary job. Ro, thanks very much for being with us. And we're also delighted to have Naomi Klein with us. Naomi is one of the outstanding writers in America. Her book, The Shock Doctrine, shocked the business class, got them upset. It was a very important book, and she has written many others since. And you're working on a book on AI right now, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The issue that we're talking about right now is an issue of enormously profound consequence. And every day we find the American people more and more worried about what's going on. Every day there's another article in some magazine or newspaper about another breakthrough that is taking place. Bottom line is, this is not according to me, but it's according to people who know a lot more than I do. This AI and robotics revolution is the most sweeping technological change that the world has ever seen. And people talk about the changes that the Industrial Revolution brought, which were profound. This is going to move a lot faster with a lot more impact. According, for example, to Demis Hassabis, who is the head of Google DeepMind, the AI revolution will be 10 times bigger than the Industrial Revolution and 10 times faster. 10 times 10 is 100. It will have 100 times the impact of the Industrial Revolution. A lot of issues to discuss, but let me start it off with Ro and Naomi by telling them what they already know, or what most Americans know. This revolution is being pushed by the wealthiest people in the world. We're talking about Elon Musk, Jeff Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Peter Thiel, and other multi-billionaires who are spending hundreds and hundreds, if not trillions of dollars combined, trying to do the research and the implementation for these technologies. So let me start off with a question for Naomi and Ro, and I think it's important for us to deal with them. What are the motives of these guys? Do the American people think that Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are sitting up nights saying, wow, we got this technology, we're going to improve life for working people. Wow, that's what we want to do. Naomi, what do you think their motives are?
Well, their motives are exactly the opposite, and they're very blunt about this, that they are in a race to reach something that they call AGI, artificial general intelligence, or even something beyond that, super intelligence. And the way Sam Altman defines AGI is the point after which the majority of economically important human activities, the work that we do, in other words, is replaced by machine learning. I agree with you that it is a revolutionary technology, that it is going to transform our economy on the scale of the Industrial Revolution. But unlike the Industrial Revolution, which created huge numbers of jobs, the goal of this revolution is to eliminate jobs. So we don't know whether they will achieve what they're trying to achieve, but they've been absolutely transparent about what they want to achieve, which is a jobs apocalypse. So we can't really have these debates about whether it's going to be good or bad, a particular technology, whether something is going to make things safer or not, when what we know about this system and these individuals is that they break unions with great aggressiveness. They want to be free from their workers. They really don't like it when their workers organize and push back, whether in unions or outside of unions. And I think that's part of the appeal of AI for these guys, is the idea that they could become trillionaires with virtually no employees. I think that might be their idea of heaven.
Well, what's their motive? And Ro represents Silicon Valley, where a lot of these guys live and work. What's your sense, Ro?
And they're upset at me because of our billionaire tax that we've
yes, I know.
proposed. But first of all, thank you, Senator Sanders, for having us. It's an honor to be here with Naomi Klein, whose work I've read and admired. And of course, thank you to Dr. Jane Sanders and David for convening this and having these convenings on important issues around the country. We are not just asked about the news of the day and who's up and who's down, but actually the issues facing the nation. You know, Naomi's absolutely right. I mean, they want to eliminate jobs. It's what they say. I mean, Elon Musk has said he believes the AI will eliminate all jobs. And the question is, how do you use technology? We could consider a positive use of technology to help workers get a medical diagnosis to make them healthier. That's not their use of technology. They're not saying, how do we use technology to empower workers? They're using technology to eliminate workers and maximize their profits. And if you look at the Industrial Revolution, for 60 years, worker wages fell. For 60 years, income inequality fell, even as Britain became wealthy. And so the question, in my view, for AI is, are we going to let a few billionaires, trillionaires, call the shots, or are we going to make sure that the technology is actually used in any way to enhance workers, to enhance total productivity? And one other point, you don't enhance total productivity if you're just eliminating a worker with a machine, because you're still producing the same amount of things. What moves a society forward is when workers actually become more productive and they get a share of the wealth. And that's not their vision.
All right, help me out here. Explain to people what we are already seeing in terms of economics. Just one example. Let me start the discussion off in this way. Last month I was with Roe up in Stanford. When we were there, we met with a bunch of folks, and we were in Berkeley, and we took a ride on a Waymo, and I trust that everybody knows what a Waymo is. It's a driverless vehicle. So they're all over San Francisco now, and the driverless car companies are expanding throughout the country. In Texas, as we speak, there are 18-wheeler trucks on the road without a human being in it, 18-wheelers. The guess is, again, people know more than I do, that unless we rethink this, in 10, 15 years, there will not be truck drivers in America. There will not be bus drivers, cab drivers, Uber drivers. There will be a loss of millions and millions of jobs. And in terms of AI, we're already seeing the impact on young people in terms of young college kids having a hard time getting entry-level jobs. So what are you guys seeing? Naomi, what are you seeing?
I mean, I'm seeing this, you know, I teach university students and hearing these types of stories firsthand, particularly in the arts. I mean, it might seem, you know, it's particularly ironic because this is something I think we need to foreground when we think about these technologies, is that they were built based on what I would describe as theft. I mean, Anthropic has you can do a search to find out how many of your books they stole. Mine's 9, you know. But it isn't just books. It's all of our social media.
Back that up.
Yeah.
Not everybody is as knowledgeable as you are. So what does it mean that they have now absorbed millions of books and all kinds of
pieces
things?
of art?
Right.
Because the model of this, you know, they're called large language models, they have scraped the entire internet. They have scraped all of human knowledge and culture. Every written word, every image that exists, it has just been enclosed. It has been privatized and used to train these models. So there are a few lawsuits that have allowed us to find out, okay, how did you train these models? Because, of course, they don't want to disclose this information. But we do know. They're training it on journalism in order to replace it, right? So I'm hearing this from a lot of young people that, you know, say people who had gotten entry jobs as animators have then lost those jobs. So that's just one piece of it. I'm also hearing that the only jobs that are on offer for young graduates are jobs training AIs, right? So basically to translate their biology degree into machine learning. And there is this acute awareness of like, I am training this robot in order to make sure that I never have a job. And there's something very, very bleak about that. Now, if we lived in a world that took care of people, right, that where, you know, if a job was eliminated, people had a guaranteed income, they knew that they had health care, they knew that they weren't going to get evicted, we'd be having a different conversation. But, you know, Senator Sanders, I appreciate so much, I think because of your long track record dealing with these companies and knowing how Amazon treats its workers, knowing how Facebook treats its workers, that this is not going to suddenly be the exception where all of a sudden these companies care
right.
about working people.
Ron?
Well, I think it's so important to realize the billionaires, and I've shared before that there are 19 billionaires who have over $3 trillion of wealth, 12.5% of our GDP. It's 3 times the wealth concentration as the Gilded Age with Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan. And yeah, they built businesses, but it was built on both massive public investment and an extraction. Let me explain briefly both. The public investment, I mean, the internet was created by NSF funding from UCLA to Stanford. It is tax dollars that funded the creation of AI, and a lot of that was done at ImageNet at Stanford, at Dartmouth, done at the University of Toronto in Canada. Okay. And then you look at the extraction, which you're talking about, Naomi, that they are literally taking data from every American. They are taking content in terms of what they're actually building their models on. They are, as Senator Sanders led, underpaying workers with public subsidies. I mean, that was the whole Amazon fight, that they're basically getting workers subsidized by tax dollars. And not paying them a fair wage. They're engaged in stock buybacks. So it's not like they've had a clean way of building these fortunes. And so when they say, well, haven't we built this money? And I say, well, the reason I believe you should have a tax on billionaires of 5% is because you had massive public subsidy and there was massive exploitation, extractiveness in the economy that allowed you to do that. Now, with this money, I think we do 2 things. One, my view is we should have regulation saying you have to have truck drivers on a truck. I mean, I don't want planes without pilots. You know, we want to have, I don't want 6 million people left out without a job. But beyond that, I suggested we use this money to create a Work for America program where the federal government models of Roosevelt hiring people to do things to build community, to rebuild their towns, to rebuild the country, not just becoming data folks. I've been doing things for parks and healthcare and community. And in my view, that would be something that could be a generation patriotic jobs agenda.
Let me just mention, when we talk about the economy, how bold and aggressive these guys are. The Wall Street Journal reported recently that Jeff Bezos wants to raise $100 billion to do what? To automate factories in America and around the world. In English, you know what that means? It means there will no longer be manufacturing jobs in the United States or in warehouses. He wants to get rid of the 600,000 Amazon workers and replace them with robots. Elon Musk is converting Tesla, at least partially, to a robotics company. He wants to produce 1 million robots a year. And as these guys have just said, what do you think a robot is there for? It's to replace a human worker. I don't know, nobody knows what these robots will cost, but assuming $20,000 or $30,000, that's a hell of a lot cheaper than paying somebody $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, health benefits, vacation time, dealing with unions and so forth and so on. That is what we are looking at economically. And the polling is really quite clear on this. People do not believe what the establishment is telling us. Oh, this is just another economic change. Yeah, we'll lose jobs, but we're going to gain some other jobs. People do not believe that.
If I could just share one example that really supports what you're saying, Senator. When these data centers, and you've been so active on the community resistance to these data centers, right? Because You know, industrialization is always a trade-off in communities. We know that, right? Like the factory comes to town, it may pour sewage into the river, you know, it may spew pollution, but it created jobs, and the jobs circulated in the community, and there were all kinds of economic benefits, and maybe they were able to reduce the pollution and so on. So it was a trade-off. It was a give and take. Now we have what, you know, Astrid Taylor and I in this new book, we're calling ghost factories, because it's a factory, and sometimes if it's Elon Musk in Memphis, he actually took over an Electrolux factory that used to employ hundreds of people. And now there's just a handful of people who work there. And they're overwhelmingly people working in security, you know, they're sweeping the floors. Now there's a new company that is marketing that they have robot dogs who will do security at the data centers. So even this handful of jobs that were being offered, they're already working to try to figure out how they won't even need those.
Well, let's go from robot dogs to the issue I know you've been worried about, the impact on foreign policy and war in the military. It's not just dogs out there. I mean, you're looking at potentially robot soldiers. Yes, you're looking at drones doing all that they're doing. Say a few words on the impact of AI on military stuff.
Well, we're already seeing this. The Pete Hegseth's Department of quote-unquote war, right? They signed 4 $200 million contracts with all of the major AI companies. And we don't fully know which company is doing what, but we're starting to find out. And I think just backing up, one of the things we know about AI is that it's glitchy, right? The companies call it hallucinations. It makes mistakes. They have not been able to figure out how to fix the mistakes. It happens. Anyone who's used these technologies has seen it. It can be miraculously accurate, and it can also make the most basic errors. And you're like, how did you get there? And then when you ask the companies, how did you get there? They can't fully explain it. This is a strange thing about this technology. I mean, if you built a car and you said, I don't know how it worked, right? Mm-hmm. You would think maybe you shouldn't release that product into the world, but that is exactly what these companies are telling us with great transparency, that they don't fully understand, that they haven't cracked what they call the alignment problem. So you can't issue like a straight up directive like don't lie. They don't have the capacity to do that. So if we know this about the technology, why would it be that we would be embedding it already in the highest stakes applications that you possibly can, which are the lethal ones, which are war? So we know already that that AI has been used in the U.S. and Israeli illegal attack on Iran. The Wall Street Journal reported that in the first 24 hours of the U.S. attack on Iran, 1,000 targets were identified in 24 hours to bomb. You know, we know also that terrible, terrible errors in targeting were made with disastrous, unthinkable human consequences. Is there a relationship between the two? We don't yet know. But the very fact that we're asking that question, I think, points to the stakes.
Naomi, there is some evidence that that terrible bombing of the little girls' school was kind of a quote-unquote mistake in the AI.
We absolutely need to know for sure.
And I think it's important, I mean, your point and the center's point, yes, you need human decision-making, but that's not enough. In other words, if AI is doing all the data analysis and saying, okay, here's the target, and you just have a human being saying, okay, I'm the one who's going to give the order, then they're saying, okay, well, there's a human last-minute judgment. Exactly. That's not enough. What's happened is just a dependence on these machines. And it is, from all the reporting, clear that those machines are the ones that gave the target of the school, which basically killed Iranian girls. So, yes, it was a human being at the end who said, strike. But how do you separate a culture where people are so dependent on technology? I mean, one of the things I often say when people say, hey, should we teach more AI? I said, how about teaching more civics? How about teaching more ethics in our students?
Well, take it a step further. Just let's think about this for a moment. That the idea that we're still fighting wars and killing zillions of people in Ukraine and Gaza, Iran, is pathetic. I mean, it speaks not well of humanity. But historically, at least, leaders had to make a decision. If I want to go to war, Vietnam War, whatever, I'm going to lose constituents. They're going to get angry at me, right? Their kids are going to get killed in the war. we're talking about wars now where not going to be fought by human beings, which makes it easier, if you like, to go to war. Does it not?
It does, and it's deeply asymmetrical. So yes, the United States can have drones and technology, and Israel can do that. But the people who were killed in what I've called a genocide in Gaza, 70,000 people, they don't have that technology. The starving people in Cuba, because of our fuel blockade, don't have that technology. The people in Iran who we're killing don't have that technology. So you have one side of political leadership in our country that doesn't have to worry as much about debts for our people. And we, of course, want to make sure that we're saving every U.S. service member. But then there's no consequence, no moral deliberation about the dignity and worth of people who we're killing.
All right. Naomi, you mentioned a moment ago about AI sweeping up all kinds of information, including your books. But it is not just intellectual work. They are sweeping up the private records of where I shop and my health care and all that stuff. Thoughts on that? Is our privacy, is there going to be anything left of human privacy unless we deal with this?
Well, I think we saw a glimpse of where we're being taken when ICE occupied Minneapolis. And we heard reports from a lot of people on the ground who were standing up to ICE that they were having these very creepy experiences where ICE knew their names before they had said anything. They knew where they lived before they'd said anything. So just scanning a face, scanning a license plate. I mean, you will both remember after September 11th and the attacks on civil liberties in this country, and there was an attempt to introduce something called total information awareness, which was exactly as you described, Senator, this idea that they would be able to merge our Amazon shopping records, what library book you took out, and what flight you booked, and create a kind of data cloud. But, that was before the iPhone. That was before we were doing everything online. So I think we're seeing really a resurgence of that vision of total information awareness, which they actually had to shut down because there was so much pushback. We're now seeing it really pushed by companies like Palantir. And we're not having the debate. I think a big part of it, what you were just saying about these wars where there's less of an incentive not to go to war because you have people like Pete Hegseth talking about total dominance and, they're bragging about how asymmetrical it is. But also you have now a whole other sector that is completely embedded in warfare and has an incentive to be in a state of endless war. Like we know the weapons companies already had that, right? But now the tech companies are kind of merging with the weapons companies. And of course, you've got the fossil fuel companies. They're all benefiting. So that is talk about a lack of alignment. I think what we want as human beings, which is like to live in peace and have some economic security, is the exact opposite of what this ballooning sector wants. It's good for their bottom line.
Thoughts on privacy?
Well, it's an enormous issue. I mean, it's an issue where they're not just taking our data, they're trying to figure out what we think. Sure. They're targeting us to have the most sensational response without thought, and they're targeting young people. People under 18, especially young girls who have had eating disorders because of the junk they're being fed, have had suicidal thoughts because of the junk they've been fed. And it was a dereliction of Congress. We have not passed any privacy legislation or restrictions really on social media companies, as they've had a total carte blanche to do what they want.
All right, it is no secret to anybody that in the country today we have a mental health crisis, exacerbated, I think, by COVID, especially acute among young people. I know we were talking about this earlier. To what degree, guys, do you think AI is intentionally addictive? And what are the implications of that? We are seeing now kids, and it's not just AI, it's screen time in general, with attention spans. I talk to teachers a lot. they teach very differently now. The kids' attention spans are much more limited than they used to be. The idea of asking kids to read a 300-page novel is something that many teachers think is not something they can do, etc. What is AI have? What impact is that having on the mental health, if you like, of people in our country and the world?
You know, I believe it's making us less human. I mean, I tell folks, you're very good at going viral, Senator Sanders, because people follow you. But I say, you know, when I grew up, I used to read and write. Now, if you don't say something in a 30-second video,
30 seconds! Wow!
No one will read.
Not a larger. Yeah.
No one will read your essay. No one will read your op-eds. No one will read your speeches. People may still read your books, but it's very hard. I say we're losing something as people. We're not recognizing how dependent we've becoming on these gadgets to for social relationships, for thinking, for independence, and technology is fine if the human being is in charge of technology, not letting technology dictate our lives. And we've had no pushback to these companies. They have a profit motive to do this. They have a profit motive to get us as addictive to screen time as possible, to get people to be watching their videos instead of reading op-eds or writing books. And if you're not going to push back, then they're going to continue to basically automate human life. And so, yes, there's mental health issues caused by addictive algorithms, but I think it's deeper than that. It's a question of what type of experience do we want Americans to have? And is it one where we use technology, but we're calling the shots, or are we becoming slaves to technology, which is, in my view, what a lot of these tech companies have been pushing for with increased screen time?
Naomi,
I mean, I think that the question around addiction is really related to something. I mean, there's so many themes that we could be unpacking. I mean, we've talked about how they're extracting from us and enclosing the commons. But then there's also the fact that this is very probably a market bubble, right? That they're building out more infrastructure than they have a market for, right? And so when that bubble bursts, everyone's pensions are caught up in this. So there's a whole other level at which we may be asked to pay for this. So just to maybe put a pin in that. But this is a problem for these companies. They do not yet have a business model to support this enormous level of spending. They are the projections are that the infrastructure, you know, the chips, the data centers that you've been so involved in, that by 2030, that will account for $7 trillion in infrastructure spending. There is not a market anywhere close to that, right? So the franticness to keep you talking to ChatGPT or whoever the chatbot is related to this. That's how they figure out how to monetize it. Then now they're talking about slipping ads into it. So we should understand that they've kind of backed themselves into a corner. They need people to be addicted. And that really snowballs with the mental health crisis. You know, I think it's always worth remembering that ChatGPT was released really at the tail end of COVID. It was November 2023. So just when people are kind of coming out blinking from the pandemic and thinking, maybe I'll make a friend, right? It's like, no, you don't have to. You can just talk to this machine. But I think, you know, one of the things I've studied over the years is conspiracy and the way people fall down these rabbit holes. The trouble with these chatbots is they drag you down with them, right? It's a bottomless capacity to follow you wherever you might want to go. They never get tired, unlike a friend who might go, "Are you sure you still want to repeat that same question?" I mean, they will always want to, and they'll say, "Have you considered this or that?" Right? So we're seeing it lead to an increase in stalking. We know that it's led to suicide, but we're now seeing examples where the chatbots have been involved in violence towards other people. There was a mass shooting in Canada, the largest school shooting in decades. And OpenAI does not deny that the shooter was using ChatGPT. In fact, they were so concerned by the violence of their engagement with ChatGPT that they took away the shooter's account, but they opened another account, right? So this conversation has now centered around, oh, well, they should have reported it to the police. And then that raises a whole other question. When we're chatting with these with these robots, are they surveilling us constantly? Are they going to tell the police that they don't like what we said? Instead of saying, why are we addicting people to robots in the first place, and looking at this whole model?
I think the conceit of these technologists and these billionaires was that as long as they just built technology, it would improve human beings, humankind, and no consideration for the human element. So let's just have people talk on Facebook. Let's just have people go on YouTube. Let's just have people do these chatbots and search. And of course, it was convenient because it was making them money, making them billions of dollars, but their view was like, okay, technology is just going to improve things. And you're pointing out, no, actually, a human intervention matters. And it matters that you don't get addicted. And it matters that you don't have an algorithm just sending you junk. But I think the broader problem is that there was never a system to check just extractive capitalism. There was not a human-based system saying, look, we're going to push back and have technology actually benefit people, workers. There's a lot of benefit to technology. The problem is it's not been steered in a direction for ordinary people. It's been steered to maximize profit.
Let me pick up on a point that both of you made. A couple of years ago, I think it was called the Pew Family Research. That ring a bell? Pew Research, whatever. They're a prominent and reputable polling agency. And they asked a very interesting question. This gets beyond AI. They said, in so many words, do you think life is better for somebody like you, your middle class, working class, upper income? Is life better for somebody like you today, a couple of years ago, than it was 50 years ago? You know what the answer was? Pretty overwhelmingly, people said they thought life was better for somebody like them 50 years ago. Picking up with the point you're making. What is the purpose of this whole thing? All right. So if you have a flat screen TV, that's great. I can watch the football game more clearly. Great. But at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? For these guys, efficiency is the whole thing. We as human beings want a little bit more out of life than just efficiency. Okay? And that is a discussion that we have not even begun to have. And I worry. And, it's when we talk about where we've been in the last number of decades, and we've all worked on these issues, we know that it's not just economic in the sense that despite all of the technology out there, increase in worker productivity, workers doing much better today? They're not. Real wages are actually lower than they were 53 years ago. Now, what the hell is going to happen with all of this technology? Is it going to improve life? Everyone going to get wealthier? We're going to be able to raise our kids in a happier way? Well, I don't think so. The American people don't think so. But it gets, I want to get back to a point that Ro made. Let me throw it out to both of you. So given the enormous level of anxiety that the American people feel about all of these issues, given the unbelievable impact that AI and technology is going to have on our country and the world, one might think that day and night there would be serious debates in the House and the Senate, all kinds of good legislation coming up. Maybe I missed it, but I have seen virtually nothing. All right, why does that happen? Ron, who's interested in us not doing anything on these issues?
It's ironic, Senator, that you have shown the most interest in AI of any senator. I mean, if you had picked a senator, but you're leading on these issues, and I think it's the money. I mean, I just bluntly, you've got an administration that has handed the keys to the tech billionaires. They have no interest in making any regulatory framework. They come to Congress once every 6 months. They get yelled at, and nothing changes. And by the way, people should probably be yelling at the Congress as much as these tech titans, because the Congress has just given them free rein. And they use this kind of jargon of technological superiority to hide the fact that it's a basic question of values. And it's a question of, are you going to stand up for kids and consumers and workers, or are you just going to allow these technologists to call the shots? But I believe this is the issue of our time. Obviously, I'm biased. I represent that area. I see all these billions. But when you have 1/3 of the nation's wealth being produced in 50 miles in my district, and you have massive people across this country saying that the American dream is dead, and you have no sign of the AI revolution going to stop, and if we're not talking about this issue, I just don't see how you talk about wealth inequality or income inequality or jobs or labor or anything else. We've got to get a handle on this, or this is going to be worse than globalization and automation.
Naomi, why has governments around the world been so quiescent on this issue?
Well, first of all, I have to say I really appreciate, Congressman, that given where you live, and I'm sure that they've offered you all kinds of money, that you have been speaking out on this.
Well, they're offering my opponent all kinds of
Right. But look, it is, there's so much this can bring the country together, right? There is so much bipartisan opposition. Any politician that decided to run on this and truly make this their issue and spoke to the spiritual crises that we're talking about. What does it mean to be human? But also the economic. Also, by the way, the climate, which we haven't talked about, which we could have talked. It touches absolutely everything. At the community level, what's really driving this is people are worried about their water. They're worried about noise pollution. It really is. Astra and I, we call it the new pro-life movement because it really is so basic. It's like, do you like life? Do you like the animate world? Do you care about this? Turns out most people do, however they vote. I think that there's the potential to make taking AI money as toxic as taking APAC money. There's APAC and AI PAC. And as long as there are politicians going into this space and saying, we're on your side, I think that they can really create a very broad tent. If the Democrats don't do it, it will be the same thing as the neglect over free trade.
Right.
It will be a repeat of the same thing.
Very good point. I would just mention to folks that to the best of my understanding, as of now, just for the 2026 elections, AI has already put $400 million into elections. And we got 5 or 6 more months to go.
Yeah.
So let's assume that any candidate who gets up there and says, I have some real concerns about AI, let's slow it down, let's make it work for people rather than Elon Musk, that candidate will have zillions of dollars thrown at him or her, which speaks to a corrupt campaign finance system, et cetera, et cetera. But to my mind, it is very clear why Congress is not dealing with this issue, and that is the power and the wealth of people who do not want us to deal with it. Let me move to another issue, which sounds a little bit like science fiction, but unfortunately it's not. I talked to a guy named Jeffrey Hinton. You know Hinton. Yeah. Jeffrey Hinton is considered to be the godfather of AI. He's worked on this thing for decades, Nobel Prize winner in physics. And what he says, and others say it as well, we met some folks out in California, is that AI and robotics, AI especially, is moving so rapidly that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when it will become smarter than human beings. And the fear of these guys, which used to be science fiction, is that AI will essentially establish its independence from human control in order to protect itself, and then raising the possibility of horrific things happening. You guys have any thoughts on that? You believe that? Don't? Is Hinton exaggerating the problem, or is it real?
I'm interested to know what you think.
Well, I certainly think it's a real risk, and I don't know whether it will happen or not, but why would we not take every precaution to make sure it doesn't? I mean, if you put it at whatever probability, there's a probability of agentic AI doing incredibly damaging things. And this is what I don't understand with when people say, well, we want to compete with other nations and have a race to the bottom. Why not have America, to the extent that we are going to have AI, be excellent in making sure it doesn't have surveillance, in making sure the agentic AI isn't going to do crazy things, in making sure that it's safe, in making sure that we have regulation. By the way, then probably people from Africa and Asia and other places would want the American standard. That's what we used to have in our industry. When we used to have labor and strong safety standards, people used to say, yes, I want the American product because I know there's a quality to it. Instead of saying, okay, no, we want to have a competition to the bottom and be selling stuff that may kill you if it goes wrong. And the other point on the regulation is, by their own admission, and maybe they're hyping the technology, they're saying this technology is going to be bigger than nuclear, it's going to be bigger than electricity, it's going to be bigger than aviation. Well, the last I checked, we have an FAA for aviation, we have nuclear energy regulated, and we have electricity regulated. So you're telling me on one hand that this is going to be bigger, and then you're saying you don't want any regulation? I mean, it makes no sense.
I mean, and more than that, I do think that if we look at these Silicon Valley billionaires who lined up behind Trump during the election campaign, and many people were surprised to see them there in the front row at inauguration. Some of them, like Peter Thiel, had supported Trump for a long time, but the others didn't. A lot of them didn't. And if you listen to what they have been saying about why they flipped, a lot of it was because there were some gentle regulations on crypto and AI during the Biden administration, including things like trying to figure out how to prevent, AI from killing us all, and keeping it away from nuclear weapons. Really sort of sensible policy that you would think. Apparently, this was too much. Mark Andreessen gave an interview to the New York Times where he said they were trying to kill us. And what's going on now with the Trump administration, and you can track it during the election campaign. There was a fundraiser at David Sacks's house. They explained to Trump that AI would use a huge amount of energy and it could all come from fossil fuels. He thought that sounded fantastic. And the guy who spent his off years suing big tech and railing against them suddenly decides he's going to be their best friend. And they raised $12 million in one night, and they've been, showering him with money ever since. This, by the way, is a huge betrayal of his base, who thought that he was anti-big tech. So that's, something else to harvest if anybody wants to do it.
That's the peace candidate you're talking about?
Exactly, the peace candidate.
Wanted to make sure we're talking about the same guy.
No, I mean, I think that one way of understanding what has happened with Silicon Valley, what some people are calling tech fascism, is that the whole thing was a revolt against regulation of AI, that they wanted this Wild West environment because that was their ticket to this, to the kind of wealth we're seeing. Let me jump in here
and ask you guys a question. No great secret that capitalists always want to make more money. They're anti-worker. They want bigger profits and all that stuff. Nothing new about that. But we are looking at a rather weird group of people right now at head of big tech. I mean, it's not just that they want to get richer, they do. Not just that they want more power, they do. They're into some pretty weird stuff. I mean, you have Thiel suggesting that people who want to slow down this technology for all of the reasons that we have talked about are anti-Christ. These guys are building bunkers, underground bunkers, to protect themselves. What is kind of different about these guys than previous business people who simply wanted to make a whole lot of money? Anything different about them, do you think?
Well, some of them have a godlike complex, and I don't say that with lightly. I mean, one of the people said to me, Ro, you don't understand. We would have been conquerors in a different age. We are the ones carrying civilization. They don't view wealth concentration as a negative. They view it as a positive because they think they're the ones who can invest the money in a way that will move America.
And democracy?
They're on. I mean, Peter Thiel and the thinkers that they listen to actually think democracy slows things down. Democracy is weakness. Democracy is too messy. That the people who carry American civilization are people like them, and they're trying for immortality. I mean, they're literally trying to defy the human condition, and it's important to understand it because it's important that it's not just corruption. Trump's sort of petty corruption. This is a dangerous ideology that is anti-democratic at its very core, and that is filled with hubris.
And some weird religious beliefs as part of that as well.
Well, they talk, I mean, Elon Musk talks about how what they're actually doing is conjuring a god or a demon. They're not sure whether it's a god or a demon. And then One of the Google guys says, well, no, actually AI is polytheistic, like maybe they are summoning multiple gods. There is a way in which the only thing you can compare what they're talking about, when they they'll talk about these two scenarios. One is this sort of AI nirvana, right, where we all are just unlocking the secrets to the universe and lounging around.
We're going to live happily ever after.
Right, and it's heaven what they're describing, and then, but there's a 30% chance that we might all die, right? So it's kind of like Armageddon, and it's the rapture. It's all bundled together, and it also is making them the first trillionaires, right? So I don't think that we can ever we can't lose sight of that. But no, I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this. And I do think there is something around this idea that they are creating life, that they're creating a new species, a new human evolution, which then creates the rationale for not having to worry about what it's doing to actual human beings down here or the natural world.
Everybody hear that? Take a deep breath and hear what Naomi just said. I mean, this is, in other words, hey, we don't have to worry about humanity today. We're doing something better. Don't have to worry about the 8 billion people on the planet right now. I mean, it's not, I don't know all that much about it, but, Musk keep talking about going to another planet. These guys building underground bunkers, et cetera. He turned, it's, to say the least, it's weird, and I think it is very dangerous. Let me bring it back home, in a sense, to where we are right now.
By the way, Bernie, I think you're in trouble when you can't describe reality without sounding crazy. And that's actually what we're...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know. What we are seeing, I think these guys thought they can make the case, say, we're going to build all these data centers, we're going to move aggressively in AI and robotics, everybody is going to see a higher standard of living, don't worry about work anymore, da-da-da-da. Of course, we don't want to pay any more in taxes, by the way, but forget about that. But it didn't quite work out that way. What we are seeing in all over this country, from in conservative areas, in progressive areas, people saying, hey, thank you very much. We prefer not to have a data center in our community. Naomi, you've written a little bit about this. Why don't you say a few words?
It's a true uprising, and it's blue cities, it's deepest red state. I've actually never seen such a widely bipartisan issue. And even, within the communities, people are saying, I'm talking to Trump voters, and we're finding that we're both concerned about the water in our community and so on. So it has tremendous potential. And
explain a little bit. Take a minute to explain actually the kind of resources that a data center requires.
Well, it depends on the data center. I guess we could talk about, why don't we talk about Elon Musk's work in Memphis, where he was worried he had fallen behind, so he went into kind of hyperdrive in order to open the world's largest supercomputer in Memphis, Tennessee, in a majority black part of Memphis near a community called Boxtown. But he was in such a rush that he couldn't generate the energy fast enough, so he rigged up, I believe it was 35 gas-burning turbines, the kinds of things that would be used as an emergency backup generator in a remote area, 35 of them, just roaring sound, and spewing carcinogens into the air. Lack of transparency, so intrepid environmentalists did a flyover, so they used infrared so they could prove that this was actually happening. Then he opened 2 more. By the way, he called it Colossus, and that is the name of the supercomputer in science fiction that takes control over the nukes. So once again, I don't know what's wrong with these guys. But so that's, in Memphis, it's overwhelmingly about air quality. It's already an area that has been the site of terrible environmental racism, already has very, very high childhood asthma rates, cancer rates. So this was on top of that. But in other communities in Memphis, where where Amazon wanted to build a huge data center, it was really about water because it's such a water-stressed area. So it depends, it depends on the geography. But the issues have been water use, and there are different ways of building a data center that are more or less water intensive. But one of the things that people find when they're opposing a data center is they cannot get information. It's like trying to get information out of any of these companies, right? They are black boxes. taxes. So one of the things that, one of the reasons why I think it's such a good idea to have a pause and set some standards is a basic standard might be you have to tell the community how much water and energy and the impact on their electricity rates, things like that. Of course, Trump has tried to overpower this, so this has become another issue. It's become a democracy issue because people start organizing when they find out about it, often very late in the game. In the case of Memphis, it was all covered by NDAs, so they found out about it after it was already open. Okay. In other cases, they find out about it, they organize, they get the council to vote in their favor, and then it gets overridden because Washington is saying, actually, this is a national security issue because we're in a war with China.
I think it's inspiring to see the citizen activism around the opposition to some of these data centers in their communities. It's for all the reasons you said, whether it's the water or the electricity bill going up, or the fact that no one asked them what they wanted in their community for their land and what they thought was their vision. But I almost think it's deeper than just the data center. My sense is that some of these movements are upset and striking out against a feeling of a loss of control, that they don't see a political system or an economic system working for them where they have no control. These billionaires are putting these super PACs, they're buying government, they're buying politicians, they have offshore jobs, they have automated jobs, their kids, they don't know if they're going to have a good life. They feel like they haven't, their economic standard has been declining the last 50 years. And, people love throwing out the word Luddite, but anyone who studied the Luddite movement who knows it wasn't an anti-technology movement. It was a movement for workers saying this industrial revolution isn't working for us. We want our share. And I say this all the time to the tech billionaires. I say, I'm the nice guy. The generation coming after me, they really are going to be much tougher. Just pay taxes as the anti-revolution tax. Have a new social contract because you don't understand the anger that's bubbling up in this country.
No, I think both of you make really good points. And it gets back to, I think, Ro, you mentioned when I'm in the free trade argument. I was here in the House, actually, in the middle of those debates. And what the ruling class said is, hey, we got this great thing. Look at China. It's a market of 1 billion people. Do you know how many jobs we're going to create selling our products to China? And all of us knew that was a lie. What we understood is they wanted the labor in China, which then was like 25 cents an hour in factories. And what happened is thousands of factories in America were shut down. Millions of people lost their jobs. And many of those communities have not recovered as of today. And now we're hearing again, hey, trust us. There's a great technology going to improve your life. People increasingly do not believe it. They don't trust the motives of these multi-billionaires for all of the right reasons. And what you're seeing, just all over this country, in red communities, people are saying, excuse us. They're thrown out there, taking on their local city councils, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really an unprecedented grassroots revolt, not only against the data centers, but against this whole idea that the people are sick and tired of very, very wealthy people operating in a secretive mode, pushing through what they want against the needs of ordinary people. It's a big deal.
Sometimes it's about farmland, too, just because they're so huge, right? And so there's a farmer in Kentucky who was offered $26 million to sell her farmland. And she said, I'd rather feed the nation.
Oh.
But, what you were saying, Ro, about the accusation of being anti-technology, I think part of what we're dealing with is that AI is really a marketing term. It doesn't mean anything. We used to call it machine learning. All of these things are being bundled together. The very dangerous, superfluous things that clearly make life worse with things that everybody would support. If it's going to help with cancer research, who's going to oppose that, right? So we get told that we can't make any choices. It's either all or nothing. And that's simply not the case. And what anybody who actually uses the technology will say is that actually if you want to use AI for cancer research or to make renewables more efficient, you can get great live data about where the wind is blowing. Those are very small models. And the most important thing about those models is that you have good data for them. If you've got good clean data sets, you're going to get really useful AI. And this administration has been slashing funding both for climate research and for cancer research and for all the kind of basic research that would make sure that AI was able to be used for useful purposes. So I think we need real experts to come in here and explain a lot of this, because it's deliberately mystified.
All right, we're coming to the end. Ro, where would you like Congress to go from here?
Well, picking up just on one of Naomi's last points, I think is so important, because while we've had ChatGPT and all this social media, one of the things that even these tech leaders can't explain is that productivity, actually, of the country has not gone up dramatically. So it's not like we are even increasing dramatically the production of the nation in things that are providing better health and better jobs and education. It's that you really have been either eliminating jobs or moving profits in significant ways to these billionaires. My view is that three things. First, we need to start with the most immediate of jobs, making sure that there is no effort for these AI companies to be throwing out truck drivers, throwing out workers, getting people fired, having bargaining rights at these companies, and making sure human beings are protected. Second, I do believe there's an opportunity for a bold, patriotic jobs agenda with the federal government, modeling what Roosevelt did. And the reason is now it's not just blue-collar jobs that are at risk. It's jobs of, kids. I was just at Brown. Now the Ivy Leaguers are concerned. So you have a broad constituency for pushing a jobs agenda in this country. And then third, I would say, is just fundamental safety and regulations, that people need to know that the billionaires aren't going to have a free reign. And we should be very simple. And this is something, Senator Sanders, you've been very clear about in part your whole time around the country, which is identifying what the problem is and not using 15 paragraphs to explain it. It's the problem is the political money in politics and the corruption of that, and standing up to that with these AI PACs and others and getting regulation done.
Naomi, where would you like us to go?
I think we need to have a national and international conversation, because these are global technologies, about how we can use these very powerful tools to make our lives better, to enhance life, to have a human-first AI policy, right? And that means that we look at it holistically. We figure out how we do it in the least resource-intensive way to have the best results. And then it isn't about turning a bunch of guys into trillionaires. It's about what kind of society we want to live in, how we want to treat each other, how we want to protect the natural world. That's a really good conversation for us to have. I think we should be having town hall conversations about it, and we might find out that we have more in common with our neighbors than we thought. I think it could be a fantastic exercise. And like I said before, I think any politician who takes it up is going to be very popular indeed.
Well, let me just pick up on your last point in saying that I've talked to people in China. I don't know if you have, Ro. And some of them have exactly the same concerns that we're talking about right now. And it's important, because of the nature of this technology, that we work together globally. It can't be just done by the United States. It's got to work with other countries. Number two, as I think we've been discussing here, I think the resentment and the concern about this technology has everything to do that people no longer believe in government, what politicians are saying, and certainly not what the billionaire class is saying. They've been through it. So you're living in an America today where we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had. What is this thing going to do to that? It'll make it worse, right? Anyone deny that? We have a healthcare system which is broken. We have an educational system which is deeply flawed. Kids can't afford to go to college. 3 blocks away from here, we have people sleeping out on the street. All right. So I think there is a massive distrust at the establishment, at both political parties, at the ruling class of this country. And I think the point that we have all been making is now is the time to take a deep breath. The people have got to determine the future of what happens in our country and in the entire planet. Not a handful of extraordinarily wealthy, arrogant, anti-democratic multi-billionaires. That's what they want. They have their goals. They are not our goals. So we need to take a deep breath. We need to move aggressively. We need to take them on. As you've heard all of us say, there's a lot in AI that can be beneficial to improving our health, our education, etc. Let's figure out what works for us. Let's understand what works against us. Let us, ordinary people, determine the future of this explosive technology and not just the few. So with that, let me thank Ro and Naomi for being with me this afternoon, and thank you all for watching. Take care. Good
Thank
job.
you so much.
Okay?
Yeah, it was great.